Thank you. Right, let's not just belabor that point, but quickly just look at that issue of the taxpayers now who will foot the bill on route of hot order. Also, you can follow the story at the back page of the Daily Nations. Kenyans will bear the brunt of repaying the Chinese loans should SGR business reduce. And earlier on, Bilokero, you began by saying, some of these orders that have come from the president were way quick off the mark. He should have maybe just settled, reviewed them, and see what will be the likely blowbacks that will come from those orders as well. So let's just explore this particular space right now and the import and the gravity of this order, especially to Naivasha dry port, first of all, and taking back the business to Mombasa. I don't know, many Kenyans, they're normally seeing opportunities. They want to go faster, buy land. I saw a tweet, someone saying, now the prices of land in Naivasha were going for, up to 4 million. So if you want to sell it off right now, this is the time to do it very quickly. By next week or next month, it will be actually 3,000 per acre there.
I think when the Uhuru Ruto regime in 2013 came up with the SGR, their concern was the cost of freight, and overall our competitiveness in the region.
Yes.
And freight was a major concern by the manufacturers and businesses. And in their first budget, I remember, they said they would reduce the cost of freight from Mombasa to Nairobi from 140,000 shillings on a 40 foot to about 30,000 by use of SGR. So one of the objectives of SGR was really on freight. That objective apparently was not achieved. That the cost of freight by SGR is more or less the same as it is on the trucks. But more importantly, I think the way the design of the SGR itself was done, and the where it terminates, and you have to still pick the cargo from there and so forth. So it has not become very popular. So the figures by KEBS, you remember, in the first 3 years of operation, SGR was only able to transport 70 million tons out of, and Mombasa port handles 35 million tons annually. So you can imagine how far off the mark SGR was. So I think, but more importantly, I think the so many other services that are related to direct and indirectly in the port were affected, and so politically then it gained currency that SGR, the port operations should revert back to Mombasa. But there's no doubt that slowly I think the freight was picking up in SGR. But not anywhere near what comes in through Mombasa. It's still a very small fraction if you've seen despite all the amount of money that has gone into it, 500 billion plus, you have one freight, it's one in the morning and in the evening. It's the only time you'll see the SGR operating, and they're not really that busy. So the trucks are still on the road. The cost of freight has not, so it has not helped us in our product, in our competitiveness, whatever. All the real objective had not been achieved. But this action, I think, is more about the port of Mombasa and the benefits to the many institutions and industries and offices and services that are being provided. All those container freight stations, all those port activities. When containers coming, they would be kept there. Those guys all those businesses were making money, and the clearance was easier. Now, in some cases, you have to get all the way to Naivasha to get your things cleared, and then probably some of it is coming back to Nairobi. So I think there was a sense in which it was not seamless. The operation of the SGR and the Naivasha was not designed to move very smoothly. But there is no doubt that this action will also cost the investments that have already been made in Naivasha. A lot of people have already set up along the routes, especially that Mahiu area. People have taken up a lot of land. Offices have been set up. Many logistic companies are there. Governments have been offered land so that they can actually have their dry port there so that all their goods can come. But none of the governments have taken up the offer. Uganda declined, I think, and South Sudan and others. They have not taken up that offer. And I think so. Mombasa still remains, and the favorite position really in terms of clearing your goods. It's easier, it's more efficient, even for people who are bringing their containers. For small businesses, particularly, they found Mombasa is more efficient than getting. If you're bringing just one container, you're importing stationery, and it's easier for you to do all your things in Mombasa and ship your container to Kitui, to Nairobi, to some place than to get it, all the way. So I think though it's a decision that was coming, and I mean it was expected because they had given the plate, but the consequences, the effects on particularly on the dry port and the replacement, because you said it's going to be replaced with an industrial city. Industrial city is not a government waking up and putting up industries and start manufacturing tables and papers. No, I mean they would expect to provide some incentives for investors to come and put up like Konza, and those things take long in coming because investors don't want to just go. They want to see what incentives are there. Why would I relocate my business from Nairobi to Naivasha? What incentives? So I think that may be long in coming, but I think this decision has already been made, and it appears hopefully we hope that it will help the economy.
Indeed. But if we may ask and talk about idle capacity, now that we're shifting all the services back to Mombasa, heavy investment has been made in that particular port. We can talk about the asset utilization and asset sweating as well in a country where we're trying to tame our wastage.
But the issue, these things, some of the decisions, and this has been said by President William Ruto just before he was sworn in, during the campaigns, that what we agreed, he said, as Jubilee, was not to put up a dry port in Naivasha, but to put up an industrial city. And that what the President Uhuru did later was not what they had agreed, and that it was zona. This just points to the fact that the issues of policy is important. But one of the things that has characterized the leadership of former President Uhuru Kenyatta has been his obsession with what I always call legacy projects, things which he wants done because he thinks that is the right thing, not because that's what the government collectively agreed. He says, I want this. For example, the port in Mombasa, we spent nearly over 42 billion to put up those 3 berths. It's lying idle. You're not able to utilize Mombasa fully. You put up another 142 billion in anticipation of the lapset thing, and you don't know when this thing will do. So, and his argument has always been that, look, I'm looking ahead. And he gives that example of the Lunatic Express. So, but I think even SDR, even the 5 million that they did last year is nothing compared to the total tonnage of goods, which is 35 million annually from Mombasa port. So it's a small fraction. So it has not been really. But more importantly, if the objective was freight, reduce the cost of freight to manufacturers and to businesses, it has not succeeded. The decision, I think, to set up the ministry has already been made from the announcement that we have had the president make. Is it the best decision? Well, that we'll wait to see. But of course, the only country I know in the world where there is a ministry of diaspora is Israel. And Israel, because of its ideological nature, everyone who lives, you're a Jew and you're anywhere in the world, you're a citizen. But
I think even the term diasporans emanated from Israel.
Yeah. So there's no other country. Countries like India, which has the largest diaspora, over 30-40 million people, and they earn $100 billion annually. Doesn't have a ministry. Egypt, the largest, the top 10 in the world also, it makes over $30 billion. Egypt from diaspora. But I think for me the most important thing, the question you asked is, of course, most of the remittances we are getting to relatives, consumption. But there are also many Kenyans nowadays coming to buy properties and try and. So if the investment environment, the economy itself is good and the returns are good, that number will double. The 2 billion will go up to 3, 4, 5 billion. So it's about the environment It's not as much about the ministry as it is on the business environment or the economic environment and the opportunities. I think that is what is important. What the government can do, in regard to your question, is probably create some investment, some PSBs, for example, on some specific infrastructure bond for diaspora, with returns which are more competitive than what you would get on Nairobi Stock Exchange or in any other opportunities that are available in the country. But so I think it's the environment, the business environment, the economic environment. If it improves, you'll find more inflows. I mean, instead of to get an investment in US, if you're working in US, you know it, or in UK, whatever. I mean, to get a very viable return, a good return is not an easy thing to. But in Africa, it's that the returns are much higher than in any of those. So I think the government can find some public some special purpose SPVs to try and see if they can attract specific funding for specific projects.
Primarily also, Bilo, I think the greatest frustration for the diasporans has been the cost of the remittance itself, right? When they're sending this money also, that cost element, if it can be looked, and I hoped since you sit in the board of diaspora, we'll have actually spoken to the cost element of remittance. If you want to get a huge chunk of money,
that's why we want the bank.
That's why you want the bank.
Yeah.
Brown was not here today because you would disagree with me. Because our capital markets is inundated with money, my friend. If there is any, you've seen every time they float a bond or an IPO, it's
especially the infrastructure.
Kenyans are not. The question is not Kenyans are not saving. Kenyans are not getting an opportunity to invest. The issue we were discussing here last week. When was the last time you saw a government placing any of its companies on the stock exchange or any of the private companies? Well, every business here is more or less family. Businesses are coming up. Very few companies are trying to look for money on the capital markets, but the opportunity for funding is there. So the savings is not a major problem, I can assure you. If the government wants to do things, they can raise all the money they want on the capital markets. The government has abandoned the capital markets for a long time, and this is the issue I think Brown has been raising many times. But I agree with Dr. McPhee. There's no way you can have a preferential bond or a preferential investment terms for diaspora. And that is going to...
we don't expect
that will not happen. That will not happen. But today, diaspora people, what they need is to be organized and to be... Information is power.
Yeah.
What probably they need to do in your ministry... I hope you come to
Thank you.
is to take that information out there to them about the bonds that are available, the opportunities on the capital markets, the opportunities for investments. I think sometimes when you are out busy working in those places, you may not be privy to most of the information that is available. So the opportunities, like when you go to is it called the investment authority? We have an investment authority. When you go to the office, you've seen their brochures.
Yeah,
it gives you a list. It gives you a list of all the investment opportunities and whatever that is available. I think that kind of thing is probably that you guys will work on. But I don't think I'll see a situation where the government of Kenya will have a preferential bond.
Headline thoughts. We wind up.
No, I don't think we need to belabor the point Dr. McPhee had said earlier about the nature of our expatriates or our Kenyans who are abroad are mainly people who are working, and so the type of remittances are mostly small remittances. There are about 3 million Kenyans abroad. So these are small remittances that are mostly for support for the families. But and the opportunity for investments are not limited to Kenyans only. The opportunity for investments are there, and we have got some of those people back. By the way, the brain drain thing. I remember during the time of Moi there was a dream team, and some of those guys were all experts who are working in Washington and IMF. They came back and later even Kibaki. I remember the PS foreign and so forth. We got quite a few people back, but I think. It did not change the landscape so much. Maybe it came back to an ocean.
To the system of doing things that you were talking about.
But let us have the ministry. Let's have the ministry. And then, when you sit on your desk there in the ministry, then maybe you'll